Before we get this started, let me ask you, what do you think is possibly the worst thing that could happen to someone who's recording the review of a laptop or a tech product on YouTube? So your probable answers would be maybe the mic was turned off or that the footage was deleted, and the second guess would be right because I deleted the entire A roll on accident of the Lenovo Legion 7i review. But something else also happened and the camera actually fell and accidentally the lens got snapped. So now here we are, I'm recording the entire review again, but I feel that my thoughts are a bit more in order right now, so that is probably going to help the review. Now before we get this started, please do make sure to hit the subscribe button and also turn on notifications for more videos like this. Now let's begin the review of the Lenovo Legion 7i. So I'd like to start by discussing the various specifications as well as features and the configurations that you can get. So this comes in a single variant that has a 15.6-inch display, but it's available in two different display options. This one that we have here is a 144Hz panel, 1080p, and has 3 milliseconds of response time, but you can also get it with a 244Hz panel if you prefer that. Apart from that, you also get up to an Intel i9 processor, but we have the i7 variant here, and this is an 8-core 16-thread CPU. You can also choose either a NVIDIA 2070 or 2080 RTX Max Q card, and we have the 2080 version here and up to 1 TB of SSD as well. Now the full list of specifications and stuff we will be writing on screen because it's quite difficult to state them all out, but this starts at a price of rupees 2 lakh, and this particular config that we have here is retailing at rupees 2,50,000. Now I'd like to start by talking about the design itself, which is actually quite a bit different, and I'll explain why. So you basically have two different camps, one being a business or casual sort of user where you have very understated looks, very elegant, very simple sort of looks, while the other side you have very gamer like aesthetics, and these are often over the top and overdue in terms of the styling. They're often over stylized. But this particular laptop, the Legion 7i, in fact looks more or less like a ThinkPad, but with gamer aesthetics and accents to it. So let me start by talking about the the fan and exhaust vents here, which are RGB lit, and you also have the metal A plate here, which also has a laser etched Legion logo and a Lenovo logo here. The Legion logo is also RGB enabled. You have RGB strips that run all around the sides as well as the bottom here, and again you have a Lenovo laser edged logo here, as well as the keyboard, which is a True Strike keyboard, and this also supports RGB. So you can individually configure the keys using Corsair's IQ software, and you can even choose the pattern at which it moves in various zones, etc. Now I'd like to start by talking about the display, which to be honest is one of the best displays that I've seen on any laptop this year, in fact. So this is the 144Hz panel, but this is actually incredible in terms of both the contrast, the overall brightness, in terms of the response time, in terms of the the backlighting. Every way that you would possibly want a display to function well, it does really well. So I was able to edit properly off this, I was able to game on this, I was able to browse, watch movies, etc., and I had no issues whatsoever. The very slight issue I had was probably the display flex, which is got to do with the build quality, but then again this hinge is actually very sturdy that it doesn't wobble a whole lot if you're using it on your lap. Now speaking of the rest of the build, it's actually very solid build. It's full metal and it feels like a tank, for lack of better words, but it actually feels like it can take a beating or two and will last you for several years most likely. Now in terms of the weight, it is 2.25 kilograms, and of course the 15.6-inch screen size also means that it's a bit larger than most other laptops that you would consider for portable use. So this is more of a desk type use laptop, so ideally you would have it docked at your home or using on your desk or maybe in your office when you take it, but in between, that is the commute in your car or your bus or train, this is not likely to help you much. For that I would say something like the Zephyrus G14 would make more sense. Now in terms of the docking situation, I find that the placement of ports is really good, because you actually have all the ports that you would need at the back. So you have the charger, you have two USB Type A ports, which are 3.1 Gen 2 ports, you have an HDMI out and the Ethernet port. On the right side, you have a USB Type A port again, and this is 3.1 Gen 1. And on the left, again, you have two USB Type C ports, out of which one supports Thunderbolt 3, and you also have the audio jack. So in terms of the cooling situation, also you have a lot of vents, two at the back for the exhaust, on the sides as well as the bottom for ventilation. And overall, I would say that it is fairly well cooled, and I expected slightly better results from the ventilation, considering that there's so many different ways for the heat to escape, but it didn't do as well as I expected, at least internally speaking. On the surface, this was perfect and we had no issues. And then that brings me to the keyboard, which is the TrueStrike keyboard, and Lenovo shows that they actually have brought some sort of a lineage from the ThinkPad series onto this, because this keyboard was absolutely great to deal with. So it is a 10-key keyboard, and I personally love it for both editing as well as browsing, etc. But there are people who would not prefer that, but they would like to have larger keys. But the key size itself is perfect, I would say, even if you're used to a desktop size keyboard. So travel is good, the keyboard sizing is good, the spacing is good, and it also has great even backlighting, which is of course configurable like I mentioned earlier. And there's very little keyboard deck flex as well, so it does not ruin your typing experience if you're someone who likes to type away very fast, or maybe you're gaming as well. What I didn't like so much is actually the trackpad, for two reasons. One, I felt that it could have been a bit bigger. Of course, that does not really affect the functionality, but given the estate that we have in terms of the physical size, I felt that the trackpad could be larger. So in comparison, my MacBook Pro 15-inch that I have, that has a larger trackpad without being as deep as this laptop, for example. The other thing is that this is actually a plastic trackpad, so it's still a very good trackpad, but I have seen much better trackpads at lower price points. And if you're someone who actually prefers a trackpad to a mouse, then this would not keep you satisfied. You would likely have a mouse. Of course, if you're gaming, you generally don't use a trackpad, but for editing and for other purposes, you would like to use a trackpad, but this begs to be used with a mouse. But then again, considering the size and the way in which this is positioned, I would say that this is a desk type of laptop or a desktop replacement. So in that way, a mouse kind of makes sense as well. In terms of the speakers, these come with two 2-watt speakers, and I love the richness that they had. They were really loud, they had good bass, and was great for music, for movies as well as gaming, and provided a really immersive experience overall, and is one of the best speakers that I've tried on a laptop this year. The G14, for example, which is also a very high-end laptop, I felt that it lacked that sort of punch that this delivers in terms of bass, and even the overall volume output was much better on this, and it exceeded 100 decibels when we got it tested. In terms of the battery life, this comes with the 80 watt hour battery, which is pretty large, but the thing is that this is also pretty power consuming. So in our case, we have a 144 Hertz display, which coupled with the high-end specifications and components that are inside, we got around 5 hours of battery life on average, give or take half an hour based on the kind of things that you are doing, be it photo editing or just browsing or just watching movies. You would get half an hour here or there. But if you're going for serious video editing and stuff, then you would get around 2 to 3 hours maximum based on the kind of settings and stuff that you use. Now, one of the things that's worth mentioning is that because of the port situation that we have here, it's very nicely tucked in at the back, so you don't really feel distracted by the port when you're actually having it charged or plugged in all the time, because most of the ports that you have a Type A port here and two Type C ports here, they still remain free, and it looks overall quite a bit neater. The wall charger is actually a 240 watt charger, and it's 15% smaller than before, but still pretty substantial when you consider a regular adapter, for instance. But this is a high powered PC, and in that respect, I think that you can't make do with a smaller charger. So it does not even support USB Type C charging, but then you are likely to more or less drain more than recharging it, so that way making use of the 240 watt charger makes more sense. In terms of display, I forgot to mention the fact that this is also matte coated, and it actually does very well in terms of keeping fingerprints at bay. It does not reflect light as much as a glossy panel, for instance, and the viewing angles are still pretty great, and the brightness is good, not just indoors but even outdoors. Of course, this is not a laptop you would typically use outdoors, but even if you would use it, it would be fine, or even if you're sitting close to a window, for example. The webcam here is a 720p webcam. The quality is decent but not great, but then again, compared to some of the other offerings like the G14, at least you get a webcam, and most manufacturers these days are either removing the webcam or bundling it in the box, none of which the G14 actually gives. But this actually gives you a privacy shutter as well, which is actually pretty great, because there's no way that you can hack a physical shutter. Of course, they can access your camera, for example, if it is open, but if it's physically closed, then that would mean that no one can actually hack it and take pictures, for example, or invade your privacy. Now, of course, some people do stick a sticker or something of that sort, but that tends to ruin the experience overall in terms of the aesthetics, as well as has chances of getting sticky residue both on the camera as well as the lid or the bottom hinge and stuff. So that way this is much better and is a more safer option, I feel. And the overall bezels are also quite minimal, although not too minimal at the bottom. It still is on the lower side compared to some of the other offerings that we tried recently. Before we move on to the performance bit, I'd like to talk about the microphones. The quality of the microphone is pretty good, and it has several features as well that you can make use of, including the acoustic echo cancellation as well as the keyboard suppression. We didn't really have much echo to begin with in our test area, but the keyboard suppression works very well, and while the keystrokes weren't completely eliminated, they were pretty much subdued. Hey guys, it's Sandeep from Reckless, and this is the internal mic on the Lenovo Legion 7i recording my voice without the acoustic echo cancellation enabled. Hey guys, this is the Lenovo Legion 7i recording my voice with acoustic echo cancellation enabled. Hey guys, it's Sandeep from Reckless, and I'm just gonna do a test by typing on the keyboard, and you will understand whether or not the keyboard suppression in the audio settings makes any difference before and after I enable it. So currently it's disabled, and I'm going to stop speaking as well right now, and you can hear the keyboard. Then let's just see whether it makes any difference once I have it turned on. So now I actually enabled the keyboard suppression mode. I hope that you can't hear it as much as it was audible before, but let's just see how it performs, and I'm going to stop speaking right now. Now moving on to the performance bit. Let's first discuss thermals and acoustics before moving on to the benchmarks. When idle, the fan noise is around 48 decibels, which is pretty quiet, but it can ramp up all the way up to 60 decibels when put under heavy load, in which case it is quite audible, but at least keeps the machine from overheating and makes sure that the surface temperatures are normal too. We did try the quiet mode, where it forces the fans to go back to idling speeds or slightly above that, but that resulted in some heavy thermal throttling, so we'd suggest letting the fans do its thing. Speaking of editing, the laptop was able to edit 4K videos just fine, and we were able to play back content of full quality with barely a stutter. In terms of benchmarks, we got a single core score of around 1200 and a multi-core score of around 7140 on Geekbench 5. The 8-core 16-thread Intel i7-10875H got a score of 3305 points on our Cinebench R20 test, while the RTX 2080 Max-Q, it got a score of 8072 on Timespine 3D. All very impressive. In terms of SSD performance, the 7i comes with Western Digital SN730 NVMe SSD, which offers incredible performance with read speeds over 3200 megabytes per second and write speeds over 3000 megabytes per second. This is amazing and in line with what you would expect from a high-end laptop, unlike the G14 from Asus that we tested recently, where the Indian variant got a subpar SSD in the form of cost cutting. You get an Intel Wi-Fi 6 card, and while our current internet connection isn't fast enough for proper testing, we noted that the signal strength was good with no dropouts and good speed in line with what you would expect from such a card. In terms of upgradability, you can upgrade the RAM up to 32 GB, and you have 2 NVMe slots as well. Coming to the conclusion, who should buy the Lenovo Legion 7i and who shouldn't, right? And why would I recommend this over, say, some of the other laptop offerings, or say over a desktop? So the Legion 7i performs really well, and the only slightly two small niggles that I had with this was mainly in terms of the touchpad, which again is not all that bad but could have been better, and same goes for the webcam itself. And other than that, this has been a great experience overall. You have a great screen, you have great performance, you have pretty good battery life considering the specifications, but then again this is meant to be used on a desk. You have good typing experience, and overall is a very solid package. Now if you're someone who ideally uses their laptop, say in the office, and comes back home and again uses it on a desk, then this is a great laptop for you. But if you're someone who is actually using it quite a bit on the go, say going to cafes, or maybe sitting in the car or in a bus and stuff and commuting and then working on stuff, then this is not that ideal considering the larger footprint as well as lower battery life. But again, if you're someone who still needs the mobility and does not want to be, weighed down by a desktop, for example, of course, one could always argue that the desktop would give you better performance for the same price, but then again, compare a desktop to a desktop and a laptop to a laptop, and in that sense, this absolutely nails the brief of being a high-end PC, which also does well for creators as well as gamers. Thanks for watching this video. If you have any questions, do let us know in the comment section below. See you again in the next one, and please don't forget to hit the subscribe button.